They say the blood moon brings out the truth in beasts. Tonight, it burned like a wound above the forests of Valmora, a red sun bleeding through the black. The air reeked of pine, metal, and fear. Drums thundered from the cliffs, summoning the packs. The hunt had begun, and I was the prey. The branches tore at my skin as I ran. My lungs burned, every breath sharp as broken glass. I didn't dare stop, didn't dare look back. I knew what followed, not footsteps, but rhythm. The synchronized beat of wolves running in formation, the chorus of growls echoing through the trees. This was no ordinary hunt. This was ritual, tradition, punishment. They called it cleansing the bond. Every year, the Alpha King's court released rejected Omegas into the woods under the blood moon. The Alphas would hunt to prove dominance, to purge weakness, to remind us of our place. Once I'd been chosen to stand beside him, Kalen Draven, the Alpha King of Valmora. I'd been destined to be Luna, until the night he looked at me under the same red sky and said, "You are not my equal, you are my mistake." He'd broken the bond before the pack, before the moon, and now, I ran for my life beneath its gaze. I tripped on a root, falling hard against the earth. The cold mud bit into my palms. I tasted blood. My wolf whimpered, clawing against the edges of my mind, begging to shift, but I couldn't. Not yet. They would smell me, see me, tear me apart before I reached the river. Somewhere behind me a horn blew, deep, commanding, his call, Kylan. Even the sound of it froze me. I hated that it still did. I hated that my body remembered him when my heart refused to. My pulse stuttered, not from exhaustion, but from the cruel familiarity of that voice echoing through the woods. The king hunted tonight, and I was his quarry. I forced myself up and kept running, slipping through the undergrowth like smoke. The forest grew denser, older trees gnarled and silvered with moss. The moonlight barely reached this far, only shards of red gleaming through the branches. Every instinct screamed to hide, to vanish. "Don't breathe," I whispered to myself, crouching low as I reached the ravine. My body trembled. "Don't breathe or he'll find you." The wind shifted. I could smell them now, the metallic tang of weapons, the musk of wolves in human skin. Closer, too close. I slipped down the slope, dirt sliding beneath my bare feet. My fingers scraped against bark until I found a hollow in the base of an old tree. It was small, barely enough to fit me, but it would have to do. I pressed myself inside, every muscle tight, chest heaving silently. The sound of pursuit grew louder. Voices, laughter. "Spread out!" one of them barked a soldier, not Kalen. The Omega was seen heading north. The king wants her alive. Alive. My stomach turned. Why? He'd cast me out. He'd let me be branded as unworthy. What could he want now? The leaves rustled. Boots crunched close enough that I could see the shadow of their torches flickering through the cracks in the bark. My pulse thundered in my ears. Sweat stung my eyes. I bit my tongue to keep from gasping. Then I heard him. Not his voice this time, his presence. Every creature in the woods went still, as if bowing to something unseen. The soldiers lowered their heads instinctively. The forest held its breath. Kalen Draven stepped into view. He didn't wear a crown tonight. His armor was black leather, streaked with ash and silver. The moonlight caught the edge of his jaw, sharp, merciless. His eyes, once gray, now glowed faint gold under the blood moon. The wolf in him was awake. And gods, he was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. He walked slowly, every movement measured. "She's near," he said quietly. "I can smell her." My blood froze. He moved closer to my hiding place. My lungs screamed for air. "Don't breathe, don't breathe." A branch snapped above me. My heart stopped. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing. For a moment, I thought it was over, that he would tear open the hollow, drag me out, and finish what he'd started months ago when he rejected me before the pack. But then, his expression shifted, softer, uncertain. His gaze lingered on the hollow tree, as if he sensed me, as if some invisible thread still bound us. Then he turned away. "Leave this area," he ordered the guards. "She's not here." My throat tightened. He knew. I didn't know how, but he knew. And he'd let me live. As his footsteps faded into the distance, I exhaled shakily for the first time in what felt like hours. Tears welled, hot and unwanted. He'd spared me. Again. But mercy from Kaelin Draven was never kindness. It was a warning. The blood moon still burned above the forest, painting the world in red. I pressed my forehead against the hollow bark and whispered, "You can hunt me all you want, Kaelin, but I'm not your prey anymore." Somewhere deeper in the woods, the horn blew again low, steady and deliberate. This time, I knew he wasn't signaling his soldiers. He was calling for me. The forest had gone silent. The kind of silence that isn't peace but warning. Every instinct in me screamed to move, but my body disobeyed. My lungs ached from holding in the one thing that would betray me. Breath. I could still hear their voices echoing faintly through the woods, the king's soldiers spreading in a wide circle, their footsteps pressing into the wet earth, their torches burning small holes in the dark. I stayed inside the hollow tree, fingers clutching the damp bark. My heart was loud, too loud, a traitor pounding beneath my ribs. Then it happened. A twig snapped behind me. I froze. It was small, barely a sound, but in the silence it was thunder. My lungs burned. The forest listened, and then I felt him. The air changed heavier, sharper, electric with power. I didn't need to see him to know. My wolf knew before I did. Kaelin Draven, the Alpha King, the man who had once been mine, the man who'd broken me before the entire pack. The sound of boots on wet leaves grew closer, steady and slow. My pulse tripped over itself, fear and memory tangling together until I couldn't tell them apart. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to fight. I wanted to scream. Instead, I made the smallest, most fatal mistake. I breathed. Just once. Soft. Trembling. Barely a sound. But his head turned sharply, and I saw the flicker of recognition even through the slits in the bark. "Come out." His voice was quiet, but it wasn't a command. It was something worse. Familiarity, softened by doubt. I stayed still. "I know you're here." A pause. "Arya." The sound of my name broke me. I closed my eyes, pressing a hand over my mouth, as if that could erase the tremor in my chest. The sound of my name on his tongue was the same as it had been the day he rejected me. Heavy, reverent, cruel. He moved closer. The light of his torch seeped through the cracks of the hollow, spilling across my face. I knew it was over. When his hand reached through the opening, I didn't resist. The moment his fingers brushed my wrist, the air itself seemed to hum. He pulled me out in one motion, faster than I could react. Cold night air slammed into my lungs. I stumbled forward into the open, my bare feet sinking into the mud. The torchlight was too bright. After the darkness, it made him look more myth than man. He was taller than I remembered, harder. The scar on his jaw caught the light, a mark of battle or punishment. His eyes, once silver gray, burned with gold now, his wolf close beneath the surface. He looked at me as if I were a ghost. "Arya Wynn," he said, "my name's slow and deliberate. I should have known you wouldn't die easily." I met his gaze, chin lifted even as my body trembled. "You always did underestimate me." A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth, the same cruel, beautiful mouth that had once whispered promises he never kept. "You're not supposed to be here." "Neither are you," I said quietly. "Kings shouldn't need to hunt their ghosts." His expression faltered only for a heartbeat. Then he stepped closer, until the warmth of him reached me. The scent of pine and smoke, and something darker filled my lungs. My heart stuttered. "Brothers." "You broke the law, Arya," he said. "By surviving power." I laughed softly, bitterly. "Then kill me and finish what you started." The silence that followed was not human. It was primal. The air between us shimmered with the ghost of our bond, the one he'd severed under the blood moon. He raised his hand. For one terrifying moment, I thought he'd do it, that he'd snap my neck, end this story where it began. His eyes flickered, gold deepening to silver, rage warring with something far more dangerous. "Do it," I whispered. "You've already taken everything else." His hand hovered inches from my throat, but it trembled. I saw it, the faintest shake. "Why didn't you run farther?" he asked, voice low. "Because I'm done running." Something broke in him then. It was in the way his breath hitched, in the way his jaw tightened as though he were holding back more than violence. He took another step, his hand sliding from my throat to my shoulder, rough, possessive, uncertain. For a heartbeat, I thought he might pull me closer. Then he exhaled sharply, stepping back as if burned. The golden light in his eyes dimmed. He looked away, jaw clenched, chest rising and falling too fast. The soldiers' voices echoed in the distance again. Kalen turned, listening. He had seconds before they reached us, Penselv. When he looked back at me, there was no crown, no cruelty, only the man beneath the monster. "Go," he said quietly. I frowned. "What?" He stepped closer, his voice a low growl meant only for me. "Run, before I change my mind." My breath caught. I wanted to ask why. Why now? Why again? But his expression told me not to. His wolf was there, barely leashed, and I knew if I lingered another second, he'd forget mercy altogether. So I ran. The sound of my footsteps vanished quickly into the night, swallowed by the forest and the rhythm of my heartbeat. Behind me, the Alpha King's growl echoed once, not a call of the hunt this time, but of something far more dangerous. Restraint. And the part of me that still remembered the warmth of his hand on my skin hated how much it sounded like longing. The forest never truly sleeps after a hunt. It holds its breath instead, keeping watch, presentive. Hours had passed since Kalen spared me or cursed me, depending on how one looked at mercy. The blood moon still burned through the branches, though its red had softened to rust. My feet were numb, my dress torn, my body exhausted beyond sense. Still, I stayed hidden among the pines, waiting for dawn. Somewhere out there, the Alpha King still hunted. Or so I thought. It began with a sound faint, broken, not a growl, not pursuit, something softer, almost human. A groan. I froze, every nerve alight. Then it came again lower, rawer. The kind of sound that didn't come from strength, but from pain. I should have ignored it. I told myself that. I told myself to stay still, to survive, to remember the laws of this world. The hunted never saves the hunter. But the voice came again, strangled now, and it was his, Kylan. I crept toward the sound before my mind could stop my body. The smell reached me, first sharp iron, fresh blood. It cut through the forest's damp air like smoke through silk. When I found him, I almost didn't recognize him. He was slumped against a fallen tree, one knee bent, the other leg slick with crimson. His armor was shattered on one side, a black arrow buried deep in his ribs. The veins around it glowed faintly, not silver, but green. Venom. I drew a sharp breath. Even under the moonlight, I could see it spreading. The poison pulsed outward from the wound like cracks in glass. His eyes fluttered open at the sound. "You..." His voice was hoarse, broken in a way I'd never heard. "It is." He tried to rise, failed. The movement forced another rush of blood down his side. For a heartbeat, I just stood there, frozen between fury and instinct. I could turn around. I could vanish back into the woods and let fate finish what I couldn't. He'd left me to the wolves once. The moon would call it balance. But as he sank further into the dirt, as his breath grew shallow, I felt something stir, something traitorous and old. The part of me that remembered the man before the crown. the one who had once laughed under the stars and whispered, "You're the only one who sees me." I cursed under my breath and knelt beside him. The wound was deep, too deep. The venom was already threading through his veins. I could smell it. Not natural wolf toxin, not the work of beasts. This was man-made, betrayal made flesh. "Who did this?" I whispered. He didn't answer. His hand twitched weakly toward the arrow, but I caught it before he could touch it. "Don't," I said sharply. "It'll spread faster." His gaze met mine, dazed, fevered, but still sharp enough to sting. "You should have run." Apparently, I don't take orders from kings anymore. Even half-conscious, his mouth twitched, that same infuriating flicker of pride. But his eyes, gods, his eyes were full of something else. Pain, regret, a flash of fear. The last one chilled me more than the venom. Kalen Draven was never afraid. His body convulsed suddenly, a strangled sound tearing from his throat. I held him down as best I could, pressing one hand over the wound, feeling the heat burn through his armor. The poison was alive, like a serpent beneath his skin. "I can't," he gasped. "It's in my blood." "You're not dying here," I snapped. His lips parted, maybe to laugh, maybe to argue, but no sound came. I looked at the arrow again, heart pounding. The veins around it pulsed brighter, green light crawling toward his throat. I didn't have much time. The healers of Valmora used to tell stories of Omega blood, that it could draw venom out when mixed with moonlight. I'd never believed it. Then again, I'd never believed I'd be kneeling beside a dying king either. I tore a strip of cloth from my dress, pressed it over the wound, and without thinking, bit into my own wrist. The sharp taste of blood filled my mouth. "What are you?" "Saving your cursed life," I said through clenched teeth. I pressed my bleeding wrist to the wound. The reaction was instant. Heat surged through the air, silver and green colliding like fire and lightning. The venom hissed, retreating, but the pain slammed into me instead, a wave that stole my breath. I nearly collapsed, my body shaking, my veins burning with borrowed poison. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. His life pulsed beneath my palm, faint but still there. When the glow finally faded, I slumped against the tree beside him, breath ragged. The arrow had dissolved into ash. The wound had closed, leaving only a scar faint and silver. Kalen stirred, his breathing steadier now. His eyes opened slowly, heavy with exhaustion. "You shouldn't have," he exhaled weakly. "You'll regret this." "Too late," I muttered, pressing a trembling hand to my wrist. The bite had already sealed. My blood was still warm with his scent. He studied me for a long moment, as though trying to make sense of what I'd done. Then, in a voice barely more than a whisper, he said, "You always were stubborn." I wanted to hate the way that sounded soft, familiar, almost human. But instead, all I could do was stare at him. This was the man who had shattered me, the man who'd turned love into exile. And yet, here I was, keeping him alive. When his eyes finally drifted closed, I could have walked away. I could have left him to the dawn and the predators that would come for him. Instead, I stayed. Because no matter how deeply the poison had run through his veins, or how deeply his betrayal had run through mine, I wasn't ready to watch him die. Not like this. Not before I understood why. By dawn, the forest was drenched in silence. The blood moon had bled itself dry, leaving only pale mist curling between the trees. I sat beside Kalen's body, my breath fogging in the cold air. He looked almost peaceful, if one didn't notice the faint green veins still pulsing under his skin. The venom wasn't gone. My earlier attempt had slowed it, but not stopped it. I could smell death creeping closer, the faint metallic sweetness that follows the dying. He should have been dead already. Any other wolf would have been. But Kalen Draven was not ordinary. The moon had made him strong, but it had also made him stubborn. His chest rose unevenly, shallow breaths dragging through his throat. I pressed a hand to his skin, hot as fever, slick with sweat. He was fighting, even in unconsciousness. You never know when to stop, do you? I murmured, my voice raw. Even dying, you have to prove you're stronger. He didn't move. I leaned back against the tree, exhaustion clawing at me. Every muscle trembled from what I'd already given my blood, my strength, my stubbornness. And still, it wasn't enough. The elders had warned us about using the forbidden gift. Healing through the bond is not mercy, they'd said. It is exchange. A life for a life. I stared down at him, the Alpha King who'd once looked at me as though I were his salvation, and then cast me aside like a sin. I'd sworn I'd never kneel before him again. And yet here I was, on my knees. The mark of rejection still burned faintly at the base of my neck, that cruel scar of severed fate. It had faded since the night he broke it, but the memory hadn't. His voice still echoed, I release you, Omega. You are nothing to me. And still, I couldn't let him die. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't love. It was something deeper, something older, the pull of the moon that had bound our souls before either of us had a choice. I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. If the venom wouldn't leave him, I'd take it myself. The ritual came back to me in fragments, whispered lessons I wasn't supposed to know. The forbidden art of soul drawing. It required more than blood. It required surrender. I pressed my hands over his heart. You owe me nothing, I whispered. But if you live, then I'll know the moon doesn't make mistakes even when we do. The first spark came like a tremor, small, hesitant. His pulse faltered beneath my palms, then caught again, sinking with mine. Then came the pain. It felt like fire threading through my veins, pulling something vital from deep inside me. My blood burned, my vision blurred. The energy that left me was not just strength, it was life. My wolf howled inside me, trying to stop it, but I forced her down. Take it, I gasped. Take what you need. The light spread from my hands, not gold, not red, but silver, moonlight. It seeped into his chest, into the veins around the wound, pushing the green back inch by inch. Could feel it. I could see it working. Could feel it. The venom receding, replaced by something purer, older. But it hurt. The connection between us was raw, primal. I felt his heartbeat in my bones, his pain in my lungs. Every time his body convulsed, mine did too. The forest around us blurred. I couldn't tell where the trees ended and the sky began. Don't die, I whispered, my voice breaking. Not yet, not like this. For a moment, I thought it was useless. His breathing stopped, his chest went still, the light dimmed, my strength slipped away. And then, he moved. A violent shudder ran through him, his back arching, eyes snapping open though not fully conscious. His hand shot up, gripping my arm hard enough to bruise. Kaelin, I gasped, trying to steady him. It's me, His eyes were wild, glowing faint gold beneath his lashes, unfocused but aware of something. His voice came out a rasp, rough and half-broken, but the word it carried stopped my heart. Arya. My name. Not as a command, not as a curse, as a memory. He said it again, softer this time, the syllables trembling against his lips, as if he were trying to hold on to them before the dark took him again. And then, his hand fell away. The forest was silent again, save for the faint rhythm of his heartbeat, slow but steady. The venom was gone, his body was whole. Mine wasn't. I sat back, dizzy, the edges of my vision flickering white. My hands shook as I wiped the blood from my mouth. The light beneath my skin had dimmed, leaving only exhaustion in its wake. He slept now peacefully, impossibly alive. I should have felt triumph, relief, vindication. Instead, I felt hollow. Because I knew what the elders never said aloud, that each time a healer used forbidden power, it bound the giver to the one they saved. Not through love, not through will, but through life itself. I'd drawn him back from the brink, but I could feel the cost already, my pulse slower, my limbs heavier. Half his poison still lived in me. I looked at him one last time, lying there like a fallen god reborn in the dirt. He would wake, and when he did, he'd remember what I was, the Omega he rejected, the trespasser who defied his law. If he woke, he'd kill me. But I couldn't stop now, because in the hollow of his breath, I'd heard something I hadn't dared believe since the night he cast me out. My name spoken like a vow, not yet broken. The cabin smelled of smoke and iron, the scent of healing and survival. I'd dragged him here hours before dawn, half conscious and bleeding, his weight nearly enough to crush me. The walls creaked with every gust of wind, and rain beat softly on the roof, like the steady rhythm of a pulse. His pulse, to be exact. Steady, alive, against all reason. Kalen Draven, Alpha King of Valmora, was alive. Because of me, I should have left him in the forest. Should have let the poison take him. Let fate balance the scale for everything he'd done. But as I watched his chest rise and fall now, I knew I couldn't have. Not then. Not ever. He stirred when the fire cracked. A low sound escaped him. Not pain exactly. More like confusion. His fingers twitched, his body tense even in weakness. The wolf inside him wasn't gone. It was merely waiting, coiled beneath the surface. When his eyes opened, the room changed. They were the same eyes that had once turned soft when he looked at me, and the same ones that had turned cold when he'd cast me out. Gray rimmed with gold. The mark of a king and a curse of a man. He blinked slowly, gaze sweeping the room before it found me. I was seated by the hearth, clutching the edge of a bloodied rag. My wrists were still bandaged from the ritual's power. He noticed the marks immediately, of course he did. "What did you do?" he rasped. His voice was rough, too human for the power it carried. I said nothing. He shifted, wincing, the motion pulling at the half-healed wound near his ribs. "Answer me, Omega!" The title hit harder than the fire's heat. It wasn't just rank, it was a reminder of everything I wasn't anymore. "You're alive," I said quietly. "That's what matters." His expression darkened. "You should have let me die." I almost laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that surprised even me. Believe me, I considered it. He tried to sit up, failed, then glared at me as though I'd cursed him instead of saved him. "The venom, it's gone." His hand brushed the scar that remained, faint and silver beneath the ash on his skin. "How?" "You wouldn't understand." "Try me." I met his gaze, steady and defiant. "You were poisoned by your own kind. That should have killed you." "Pricey. But you're too stubborn for death and I'm too foolish for sense. So I used something the alphas forbid, something I shouldn't have." He stared at me, reading every word for weakness. "You used the bond." It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. I looked away. "You severed that bond months ago." "And yet it still answered you," he said quietly. The silence between us stretched, heavy as the storm outside. He leaned back against the wall, his breath uneven, his pride burning hotter than his fever. "Why?" he asked. "Why save me, after everything?" I hesitated. The truth rose in my throat like a bruise because I couldn't watch you die again, but I swallowed it. "I don't know," I said instead. He studied me for a long moment, his jaw tightening. "You're lying." "Maybe," I said. "But you're alive. That's enough for tonight." I stood, brushing the dirt from my hands, and turned away from him. The air between us hummed, not warmth, not yet, but something dangerous and familiar. For a moment, I almost thought he'd let the silence win. Then his voice cut through it again, quieter this time. "What happens now?" "Now?" I said, staring into the fire. "You heal. I leave." He gave a hollow laugh. "You think you can just walk away?" "I already did once." He didn't argue after that, but I could feel his gaze burning into my back, sharp as a blade. The king who'd once ruled me now lay powerless, and yet he still filled the room like a storm waiting to break. By the time I dared look at him again, His eyes had drifted shut. Sleep claimed him or something like it. Even then, his hands twitched, reaching for something unseen. Maybe the crown he'd lost. Maybe the ghost he thought he'd buried. Outside, thunder rolled through the valley. That's when I heard it faint at first, then clearer. The crunch of footsteps outside the cabin. More than one. I crossed the room silently, peering through the narrow window slit. Through the rain, I caught a glimpse of movement shadows. 4, maybe 5. No torches, no crests. Assassins, pod. So, the betrayal wasn't done. I turned back toward him. He was still asleep, unaware, his chest rising and falling slow. There was no time to wake him, no time for hesitation. And means and tations, phase hadden for mean. He stud of the denser part, the wake half in tunity part. I grabbed the bow from where it hung near the door, a relic left by the cabin's last hunter, and notched the first arrow. The door burst open before I could take aim. The first man through barely had time to register my face before my arrow struck him clean in the throat. He fell without a sound. Another rushed in from behind. I turned, fired, missed by inches, then grabbed the dagger from my boot and met him halfway. The blade found his side. He crumpled. Outside, the rest hesitated. They hadn't expected resistance. I stood in the doorway, drenched in rain, the bow steady in my hands. My heart raced, my wolf howling beneath my skin. "Come," I whispered to the trees. "Let's finish what you started." The night answered with silence. The remaining assassins slipped back into the woods. Cowards now, not hunters. When I turned back, Kalen was awake. He was watching me. For once, he didn't look like a king. He looked like a man, staring at the very thing he couldn't understand, the Omega, who had defied death and the laws of his own making. "You saved me again," he said quietly, voice rough. I lowered the bow, breath trembling. "Don't get used to it." But even as I said it, I knew it was already too late. Because somehow, between mercy and blood, we had crossed into something far more dangerous, a truce born of survival, and a bond neither of us could name. By morning, the storm had passed. The world outside the cabin looked deceptively clean, the air washed, the leaves dripping silver light. But peace is a liar. It always hides what festers beneath. Kalen sat by the fire, shirtless, the faint scar from the venom glinting across his ribs. He hadn't spoken much since the attack. His silence wasn't calm. It was calculation. When he finally looked at me, it wasn't as the man I'd saved, but as the king remembering what he was supposed to be. "Someone in my guard betrayed me," he said flatly. The arrow came from my own ranks. I didn't respond. I was stitching a tear in my sleeve, but my hands froze for a moment. "Your beta?" I asked. His eyes flicked to me sharp, assessing. Darian. Darian. The name made my wolf bristle. I remembered him from before the cold, precise second in command who'd looked at me like I was something fragile that needed to be broken. He'd been Kalen's shadow, loyal beyond reason. "Are you sure?" I asked softly. Kalen nodded once. "I can smell his venom on the arrowhead. He used the bloodroot toxin, the one only the Beta Council is allowed to handle. I trained him myself." He said it without emotion, but his jaw tightened, and that small tell was enough. The betrayal had cut deep, Kalen. "He's turning the kingdom against me," Kalen continued, staring into the fire. "If I die, he takes the throne under the pretense of restoring order. He'll blame it on a coup from within the Omega, ranks an assassination attempt by the rejected." My chest went cold. "You mean—" "Yes," he interrupted. His gaze met mine. "You." I froze. It shouldn't have shocked me. The kingdom had already written me off as cursed. A rejected Omega surviving the hunt? It would make perfect sense to them that I'd poisoned the king out of spite. Darian didn't need proof, only a story. "I'll be executed," I said quietly. Kalen's eyes softened, just for a breath. "Not if they never find you." He stood then, testing his balance. He was still weak, but his posture was iron again. The king had returned, Khan. Darien will have already sent scouts, he said. He'll expect me dead. If word spreads that I'm alive, he'll need to finish what he started. He can't risk me revealing the truth. Power. Then tell them, I said sharply. Tell them it was him. Expose him before he... I can't. The finality in his tone stopped me cold. He turned toward the window, his voice low but steady. Point. If I accuse my own beta without proof, I'll fracture the council before the kingdom can heal. The packs would turn on each other. It would be civil war. So, instead, you'll protect him? I'll protect Valmora, he said. And you. The way he said it quiet, resolute, made my heart stutter in a way I didn't want it to. You can't protect me, I said bitterly. You're barely standing. He gave a small, humorless smile. You forget who I am. No, I whispered. I remember exactly who you are, and I remember what you did. That silenced him. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire. He rubbed his temple, exhaustion creeping in despite his pride. The firelight caught the edge of his face, weary, defiant, and somehow still beautiful. When he spoke again, it was quieter. If Darien learns you're alive, that you were with me when the venom took hold, he'll use it. He'll claim you poisoned me, and that my sparing you was proof of a spell. The council would believe him. Even my wolves would turn. And I looked at him across the small cabin, the man who had once rejected me to preserve his kingdom, now willing to defy that same kingdom to keep me hidden. You'd betray your laws for me? I asked. He hesitated. I've already broken worse. I swallowed hard, unsure whether to be grateful or furious. Then what's your plan? I'll send word to my generals. Quietly. We'll smoke Darien out from within. But you, his voice hardened. You'll stay here, out of sight. No one can know you're alive. Out of sight. I rose to my feet, meeting his gaze. I'm not hiding while your beta tries to kill you again. This isn't a request. Neither was saving your life. His expression cracked just slightly, and I saw the faintest flicker of something human behind the steel. He turned away before I could read it. You don't understand what's at stake. I understand enough, I said, stepping closer. Your kingdom is rotting from the inside, Kaelin. You think hiding me will stop that? Darien won't stop until your throne is his and your death is mine. In fact, for hiding, subscribe time the Marion. Darien won't stop until his raft, making in the side, making in the He looked over his shoulder, eyes dark with conflict. Then let him come for me. I'll deal with him. And what if he wins? He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. He won't. Something in the way he said it made me believe him. Or maybe I just wanted to. I moved past him, grabbing my cloak from the chair. You can play your king's games, but once you're safe, I'm gone. His head snapped toward me. Gone where? Anywhere you're not. The words hung in the air like smoke. I expected anger, maybe even pride. But what came instead was quiet, heavy, unspoken regret. Arya, he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. When this is over, the world won't let you hide. You'll always be a mark, the Omega who defied the king. Then I'll learn to disappear. For a heartbeat. Something in his eyes wavered. Not command, not cruelty. Fear. The kind reserved for things one can't control. He nodded once, sharp and final. Then we both have our vows. I'll find my traitor, with calm. And I'll leave before your wolves do. He turned away, but I saw his jaw tighten, his fists clench. The firelight caught on his scar, a reminder of what bound us still. 2 lives tied by blood, betrayal, and choices neither of us could undo. The king swore to protect his throne. The Omega swore to protect her freedom. And the forest, silent, endless, bore witness to the fragile peace between predator and prey. The hidden valley lay just beyond the cliffs, untouched by the kingdom, a place the world seemed to have forgotten. The air here carried the scent of wild jasmine and rain-soaked moss. The mountains circled us like guardians, their peaks veiled in morning mist. Kalen said it was safe here. Safe. The word sounded wrong in my mouth. There was nothing safe about hiding beside the man who had once broken me. He had built a small camp by the stream, a fire, a lean-to, the kind of simple shelter no king should have to know. Yet he moved through it without complaint, as if he had been waiting for exile all along. Days passed in silence. I hunted. He healed. We didn't speak of Darion, or the coup, or the growing sickness festering in his veins. But silence didn't mean peace. Every glance burned. Every word left unsaid felt like a blade pressed between us. At night, when the fire dimmed and the wind shifted, I could hear it, the faint hum beneath my skin, a rhythm that wasn't mine. The bond, it shouldn't exist. He had broken it months ago under the blood moon, severing the thread that tied us as mates. But now, in this valley where no one else lived, I could feel it again, weak, fragile, but alive. I ignored it at first, pretended it was imagination. But then I saw him wince one morning, his hand pressed to the scar over his ribs. "You're not healing right," I said, breaking our 3-day silence. He didn't look at me. "It's nothing. That poison was crafted to kill alphas. You can't shrug it off like a scrape." He stood then, taller than the firelight could hold, his eyes catching the flicker of gold that always made my breath falter. "And what do you suggest I do, Omega? You already saved me once." The title stung. I hated that it still did. "Maybe I should have stopped there," I said sharply. "Would have saved us both the trouble." He exhaled, a sound between a laugh and a growl. "And yet, here you are." I turned away, gathering my cloak. "Don't flatter yourself. I'm not here for you. Pardas." His voice softened, low enough to almost sound human. "Then why does it hurt you when I bleed?" I froze. I didn't answer, but my hand had already moved to the back of my neck, to the faint crescent scar that burned there, the mark of rejection. It had been dull for months. Now it pulsed in rhythm with his words. He saw the motion, and for the first time since the forest, something flickered in his expression: confusion, fear, recognition. "Your scar," he said slowly. "It's glowing." I turned to face him, and the fire caught on the pale silver lines etched into my skin. "So is yours," I whispered. He looked down at his chest, where the wound from the venom had once been. The scar there shimmered faintly, the same silver hue, the same pulse. For a moment, neither of us moved. The world felt suspended, the air too still, the silence too loud. "Price. What does this mean?" he asked, his voice rough. "It means something's wrong," I said. But even as I spoke, the mark burned hotter, the hum beneath my skin deepening into something almost alive. He took a step closer. The bond between us snapped taut, invisible, and undeniable. My body betrayed me before my mind could protest, my heartbeat sinking to his, my breath catching in the same rhythm. "Stay where you are," I said, backing away, with Powers. He stopped, but his eyes didn't. "I can't." "You should." "I can't," he repeated, quieter this time, as though it wasn't a choice, but a truth. The air between us shimmered faintly, like heat off stone. The scar on his chest began to glow brighter, bleeding light through the thin fabric of his shirt. I felt the pull, not magic, not will, but something older, the moon itself, reclaiming what he'd tried to destroy. I wanted to hate it. I wanted to hate him. But when his gaze met mine, I felt the same ache that had once undone me. "Arya," he said softly. "What did you do to me?" My throat tightened. "I healed you." He stepped closer again, slow enough for me to retreat if I wanted to. I didn't. His hand rose hesitant, trembling, and before I could stop him, his fingers brushed the side of my neck, right where the scar pulsed. The contact was electric. The air cracked. Light burst between us, silver and white, flooding the space with warmth that wasn't of this world. I gasped, gripping his wrist, trying to pull away, but the harder I fought, the brighter it burned. His breath caught. "What is this?" "The bond," I whispered. "It's reforming," he finished. Awe and fear tangled in his voice. The light spread through the valley, scattering through the mist like falling stars. For a heartbeat, I saw everything: the memory of our first bond under the moon, the night he rejected me, the moment I saved his life. All threads of the same story, woven tighter now than before. He stumbled forward, the glow on his chest flaring. I reached for him without thinking, my hand pressing against the wound that still throbbed faintly under his skin. And then, everything stilled. The glow on both our bodies merged, his scar and my mark pulsing in perfect rhythm, silver bleeding into silver. I felt his heartbeat under my palm. Stronger, steadier, as if the venom itself was retreating from my touch. His eyes widened, the gold fading to gray again. "It's you," he said, almost reverent. "Your essence, it's the antidote." I shook my head, but my hand didn't move. "No, it's the curse. We're tied again. We weren't supposed to be." His voice dropped to a whisper, filled with something I couldn't name. "Then maybe the moon disagrees." The glow dimmed slowly, fading back into skin. The air cooled, but the echo of that light lingered between us, within us. I stepped back, breath trembling. "You should rest," I said, though the words felt empty. He didn't reply. He just watched me, his fingers brushing the scar on his chest as if to make sure it was real. The fire flickered, throwing silver light across the walls of the valley. Somewhere above, the moon broke through the clouds full again, unblinking, watching. And though I tried to look away, I couldn't ignore the truth that burned through my pulse. The bond we thought was broken hadn't died. It had been waiting for the right moment to return, under the same moon that had once cursed us both. The valley had been too still that morning. I should have known what silence meant. When the birds stopped singing, when the air itself seemed to tighten, I should have realized it wasn't peace, it was warning. But I was tired. The past nights had bled together into sleepless hours, beside a fire that burned lower each time I looked at it. Kalen had gone scouting before dawn, promising to return before midday. I believed him. That was my mistake. They came while I was drawing water from the stream, 6 wolves, armored in the royal crest of Valmora, Darian's soldiers. I ran, not because I was afraid, but because I knew what it would cost him if they found me. The forest closed around me, branches clawing at my arms. I could hear their footsteps behind me, heavy, sure, trained. Wolves bred for pursuit. The bond pulsed beneath my skin, a warning drumbeat in my veins. Kalen, I thought desperately, don't come back, don't see this. But he must have felt it, the sudden flare of panic, the echo of fear that no longer belonged solely to me. I made it as far as the ridge before they caught me. The first one tackled me from behind, sending us both crashing to the ground. I rolled, landed a blow with my elbow that cracked against his jaw, but another soldier was already there, his knee pressing into my back. The air left my lungs in a sharp gasp. "Don't fight," the captain said, a tall man with cold wolf-yellow eyes. "We're under orders to bring you in alive." Alive? I spat the word, struggling against the weight on my spine. Darian doesn't take prisoners. He smiled faintly. Not for long. Something cold pressed against my neck, a steel cuff etched with runes. When it clicked shut, I felt the bond snap like a rope yanked too tight. The connection between Kalen and me vanished, leaving only a hollow ache in its place. I didn't resist after that. The journey back to the palace was a blur of chains and silence. The soldiers spoke little, and when they did, it was in whispers I wasn't meant to hear. Darian says she's dangerous. Oh, an Omega? Dangerous? She healed the king's wound. With magic. That's impossible. Then why is she still alive? By the time we reached Valmora, the sun had bled into evening. The city gates loomed ahead, familiar stone walls. the banners I used to walk beneath with pride now fluttering like warnings. They dragged me through the palace halls, past guards who averted their eyes. The court chamber was already full. I heard the low murmur of voices, the scrape of boots on marble, and then, his voice. "Bring her forward, Darian." He stood where Kaelin should have, at the base of the throne, hands clasped behind his back, every inch the loyal second in command. Only his eyes betrayed him. Sharp, gleaming, hungry. Quote, "So this is the infamous Omega," he said, circling me like a wolf who'd already decided on the kill. "The one who ran from the hunt. The one who poisoned our king." I didn't, when he raised a hand, silencing me. "You'll have your chance to confess. Before the council." My knees hit the floor as the guards forced me down. The marble was cold beneath my palms, and the runic cuff burned faintly against my skin. "Where is Kaelin?" I asked, even though I already knew. Darian's smile deepened. "The king is resting. His recovery has been difficult." He crouched, his voice lowering so only I could hear. "But don't worry, little Omega. He'll wake soon enough to watch your execution." Hatred surged in my throat, hot and useless. "He'll see through you, perhaps. But by then, it won't matter." He rose and turned to the assembled council. "Brothers, you've seen the reports. Our king was felled by venom known only to the Beta's guild. Yet he recovered inexplicably, only for this Omega to vanish. What clearer proof of guilt do we need?" The council murmured their approval. The trap was perfect, and I was the bait. That's when the chamber doors burst open. The sound cracked through the hall like thunder. Every head turned. And there he was, Kaelin, alive. He looked as if he'd walked through hell to get there, blood on his collar, mud streaked across his boots, eyes rimmed in gold. Every guard instinctively straightened, uncertain whether to kneel or raise their blades. Darian froze. "Your Majesty," he said smoothly, recovering too fast. "You shouldn't be on your feet." Kaelin ignored him. His gaze found me instantly, and for a heartbeat, the world fell away. I didn't need the bond to feel the pull. His chest rose and fell sharply, his hand gripping the doorframe, as though to steady himself, not from weakness, but rage. "Release her," he said. Darian's expression didn't flinch. "My king," she stands accused. I said. Kaelin repeated, his voice low and lethal. "Release her." The council erupted into argument, half pleading, half afraid. "She's dangerous. She's the reason you nearly died. She bewitched you, Majesty." Kaelin turned then, slowly, deliberately. The fury in his eyes silenced the room. He stepped forward until he stood before them, all before Darian, before the council, before me. His hands curled into fists at his sides. And then, to my shock, he sank to one knee. The entire chamber gasped. "The Omega you hunt," he said, voice breaking but clear, "is the one who saved your king." The words hung in the air like thunder waiting to strike. For a moment, no one moved. The firelight flickered across the council's faces, painting them in shades of disbelief and fear. I couldn't breathe. Kaelin lifted his gaze to me, then not as a king, not as a man who'd once cast me out, but as someone who had finally chosen truth over pride. And in that moment, I realized what he'd done. He hadn't just defied his council. He'd destroyed the lie that kept him safe. He'd chosen me, and with that choice, he'd declared war on his own crown. They called it the trial of blood, but it was never about justice. It was about spectacle power disguised as law. The courtyard of Valmora was overflowing by dawn. Every pack from every province had sent their wolves to witness the downfall of the traitorous Omega. The air reeked of wet iron and torch smoke. The drums beat slow and heavy, a pulse that made the ground tremble beneath my knees. Chains bound my wrists, cold and cruel. They dressed me in white, a cruel irony, like snow before slaughter. At the center of it all stood Kaelin. He hadn't spoken to me since the night he defied the council. His armor gleamed like obsidian under the morning sun, his crown nowhere in sight. There was no king in him, now only the wolf, burning with something sharp and dangerous. Darion stood opposite him, smiling like a man who already knew the ending. The beta's voice carried over the crowd. My brothers, our king is blinded by weakness, by the touch of an omega he once cast out. He would risk our bloodlines, our kingdom for her. What it was very blinded forget is. The audience murmured in approval. Wolves always followed strength. Kalen's voice cut through the noise, low, calm, lethal. You dare question your king's command? I question your fitness to rule. Darion shot back, stepping forward. You broke the sacred law by sparing the condemned, by kneeling to her. He turned to the court. You all saw it, the Alpha King bowing to an Omega. Tell me, is that strength? The crowd roared in response. The sound was like thunder rolling across the mountains, hungry, bloodthirsty. Kalen's jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists, the faint silver scar on his chest pulsing beneath his armor. He didn't look at me, but I could feel him, the weight of his silence pressing against my ribs like a heartbeat, Darion continued, raising his arms theatrically. By the law of the moon, I challenge the Alpha King to the right of dominion. Let blood decide who leads Valmora. The words fell like a blade between them. The crowd gasped. The right hadn't been invoked in centuries. It was a fight to the death. 2 wolves, 1 crown. Kalen didn't hesitate. I accept. The soldiers moved fast after that, dragging me to the edge of the courtyard. I struggled against them, the chain biting into my wrists. Don't, I hissed, catching Kalen's eyes for the first time. Don't do this, he's baiting you. He met my gaze, steady, unreadable, then let him choke on his own trap. They stripped him of armor, leaving only the leather at his waist. His shoulders gleamed with sweat beneath the rising sunday. The scar where I'd healed him shimmered faintly, a reminder of what bound us still. The crowd began to chant low at first, then rising into a feverish roar. Alpha, beta, alpha, beta. Darion lunged first. His wolf was faster, younger, unrestrained. The two collided with the sound of thunder cracking stone. Kalen met him blow for blow, claws, teeth, fury. The earth itself seemed to shatter beneath them. I'd seen wolves fight before, but never like this. This wasn't dominance, it was desperation. Every strike was personal, every growl drenched in years of betrayal. Kalen's strength was staggering, but the venom still lingered in his veins. I saw it the split second, his hand trembled, the falter in his breath. Darion saw it too. You're weakening, the beta snarled, driving his claws into Kalen's shoulder. Blood spilled dark across the dirt. Kalen staggered back but didn't fall. His eyes burned gold, the Alpha King refusing surrender. He lunged again, pinning Darion to the ground, claws poised at his throat, and then his body locked. The poison surged through him, dragging him to his knees. Darion seized the moment, slamming a knee into his chest, forcing him down. The crowd howled. Finish it. My pulse shattered. I yanked against the guards, restraining me. Stop him. He's poisoned. They didn't listen. No one ever did when blood was on the ground. Kalen tried to rise again, but his limbs betrayed him. His eyes flicked toward me for the briefest second, and I saw it there. Not fear. Acceptance. No. I tore free of the guards, sprinting through the ring before they could stop me. Darion turned, fury twisting his face. She doesn't belong here. Before he could finish, I grabbed a fallen spear from the dirt and threw it. It missed his heart by inches, but it was enough. He stumbled back, breaking his hold. Kalen collapsed onto one elbow, coughing blood. His gaze snapped to me, wild, furious, alive. Arya, no! The soldiers seized me again, dragging me backward as the arena erupted into chaos. The crowd roared with outrage, their bloodlust unfulfilled. Hold her, Darion shouted. She interferes with sacred law. I kicked, fought, screamed his name, but they didn't stop dragging me across the stone. My wrists burned, my knees scraped raw, but I kept my eyes on him. Kalen rose barely, trembling, every muscle shaking. He met Darian's gaze again, blood dripping from his chin. "You talk of strength," he rasped, voice raw but steady, "but you've never known it." And then he struck a last brutal surge of motion that sent both of them crashing into the dirt. The guards pulled me away before I could see the end. The last thing I heard was the clash of their roars, one born of ambition, the other of defiance, echoing across the blood-soaked courtyard. And even as they dragged me down the palace steps, the only thought in my mind was a prayer I'd never spoken aloud. Don't let him die, proving what the world refused to see, that mercy is stronger than power. The world had gone red. Blood Kalen's mine, the kingdom's it was everywhere. On the marble floor, on my hands, in the air itself. The sound of battle still echoed through the court, soldiers shouting, metal scraping, the low, broken growl of a dying wolf. They had dragged me back into the hall after the trial. I wasn't supposed to see what remained of it, but I did. Kalen was on his knees. His body sagged against the weight of his own blood. His bare chest was slashed open, the mark I had once healed now torn wide again. Around him, the court that had once worshipped him stood silent, frozen between awe and fear. Darian lay a few feet away, motionless, his armor split like paper. The beta's final snarl had already faded into nothing, but Kalen had paid the price for victory. He was dying. "Kalen," I whispered, my voice breaking as I pulled against the soldier's grip. "Let me go!" The guards hesitated, uncertain whether the trial still bound them. The air had changed, a pressure building, thick as stormlight. Even the flames in the braziers bent inward, drawn toward the bleeding man on the floor. He lifted his head weakly, eyes glazed with pain. "Arya." The sound of my name from his lips nearly undid me. I tore free of the guards and fell to my knees beside him, heedless of the blood soaking through my clothes. "Don't you dare," I said, clutching his shoulders. "Don't you dare die like this." He smiled faintly, a ghost of the old arrogance, cracked and human now. "You always told me I'd learn humility one day." "Hi." I pressed my hand against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. My palms came away slick and red. "You don't get to joke," I said, my throat trembling. "Not now." "Not now." His breath hitched, shallow and broken. "You shouldn't be here. They'll kill you next." "Then they'll have to get in line," I snapped. "You're not leaving me again." Something flickered in his eyes, then not the king, not the wolf. Just the man who had once looked at me like I was the only thing real in a world made of power and lies. He lifted his hand with effort, his fingers trembling as they reached for me. When our skin met just barely, a brush of blood and heat, the world shifted. The air exploded with light. It started between our palms, a spark, then a blaze. Silver fire tore across the floor, crackling through the stone like lightning veins. The guards stumbled back, shielding their eyes. The council cried out, shouting words I couldn't hear. All I saw was him. Kalen's eyes widened as the light climbed up his arm, weaving around his body like a living flame. It didn't burn him, it healed him. The torn flesh sealed. The blood vanished into silver mist. His scars glowed like moonlight drawn into skin. My heart stuttered. I felt it too, the same heat, the same fire surging through my veins. The bond, the one he'd broken, the one the moon had refused to forget. He gasped, clutching my wrist as the silver light poured from me into him. Then back again, a current, unstoppable and eternal. I felt everything. His pain, his shame, his regret. Every night he'd spent trying not to dream of me. Every moment he'd buried behind duty and pride. It all flowed through the light, through our joined hands, through the wound that had once divided us, and then forgiveness. Not spoken, not asked for, just felt. He shuddered, eyes glistening, voice raw. I broke the bond to save you, but it was never gone, was it? Tears blurred my sight. No, I whispered. You just didn't know how to look for it. The light grew brighter, swelling outward until the entire hall blazed silver white. The court fell to their knees as shadows fled the corners. The torches extinguished, replaced by a glow that came from nowhere and everywhere. Above us, the roof trembled, stone creaking, banners whipping in invisible wind. Then the clouds outside split open. The full moon appeared through the broken ceiling, pouring its light directly down upon us. Kaelin and I were its center. The mark of rejection on my neck burned not in pain, but in rebirth. The jagged crescent smoothed itself into a perfect circle of silver light. I gasped as warmth flooded through me, sinking into my bones. Kaelin's matching mark, once a scar, now a flame, pulsed in rhythm with mine. The crowd whispered, "The moon's mark. It can't be. He severed it, it's impossible." But impossibility didn't matter anymore. The light wrapped around us like a vow remade, ancient, unbreakable. I felt the bond settle deep inside. Not a chain but a heartbeat, shared and whole. Kaelin's breathing steadied. He rose to his feet slowly, still holding my hand. His skin glowed faintly, his wounds gone, his eyes now silver instead of gold. The king reborn under the moon's witness. When he looked at me, there was no pride left, only awe. "I rejected you once to save a kingdom," he said softly. "But you're the one who saved me." I wanted to speak, but my voice wouldn't come. He turned to the court, those who had condemned me, those who had called me cursed, and his voice carried like thunder over still air. "You saw the truth with your own eyes. The moon has spoken. The Omega you cast out was never a curse. She was my mate." Silence fell. No one dared move. Not even the wind. The fire dimmed, leaving only the glow of our marks, two circles of light, bound and reflected in one another. Kaelin's fingers tightened around mine. His voice was almost a whisper now. "No crown, no law, no moon will ever undo this again." The last of the clouds parted, and the moon bathed the hall in silver peace. And in that stillness, amidst the ruin and the light, I realized that sometimes love doesn't end where it breaks. Sometimes it burns brighter after it's been to hell and back. The air still trembled from the storm of silver light that had torn through the court. The marble floor shimmered with the fading glow of our bond, two halves of a power that no one had seen in centuries. The moon hung broken through the roof, a wound in the heavens spilling light down upon us. Kaelin stood before me, breathing hard, blood and fire clinging to his skin. Around him, the council had fallen silent. The crowd that had once screamed for my death now bowed in stunned reverence. But one figure still moved. Darion. He should have been dead. Kaelin's strike had torn through his armor, yet somehow, the beta still rose, trembling, feral, eyes gleaming yellow with madness. "You think this changes anything?" he spat. "You think they'll follow a king bewitched by an Omega?" Kaelin turned toward him slowly. The silver still burned faintly in his eyes, calm and terrible. "They'll follow truth," he said. Darion laughed, bitter and wild. "Truth? You broke every law of our kind. You let weakness poison your blood. You forgot what it means to rule." I could feel it then, the tension coiling between them, old and raw. This was no longer a fight for the throne. It was for what the throne meant. Darion lunged first, a blur of fury and steel. Kaelin didn't move at first. He waited as if listening to something I couldn't hear. When the beta's blade came down, Kaelin caught it mid-strike. The clash rang like thunder. Sparks flew between them, and for a heartbeat, I saw their wolves spectral. Immense, locked in reflection, gold and silver fire spiraling together. "Dominance without mercy is decay," Kaelin growled, forcing Darion back. "And mercy without dominance is death," Darion roared, swinging again. Kaelin's strength faltered for a moment, not from weakness, but from something deeper. He wasn't fighting like an alpha. He wasn't trying to dominate. He was defending, protecting. The crowd watched in silence as the two collided again. I could feel the pull between Kalen and me, the thread of the bond glowing faintly under my skin, whispering in time with his heartbeat. It wasn't just his power anymore. It was ours. When Darian's blade grazed Kalen's shoulder, I gasped, the same pain flaring across my own skin. And then, instinctively, without thought, I reached toward him. My hand met the air, but the bond bridged it. Silver light rippled from my fingertips, finding him. His head snapped toward me, eyes locking on mine, and I saw the moment he understood. We were one pulse now, one rhythm, one strength. Kalen's next strike wasn't physical. It came from that connection, a surge of light that poured through him, through me, through the floor itself. The marble cracked beneath their feet as Darian's body lifted off the ground, thrown backward by the sheer force of it. Power. When he landed, he didn't rise. The beta's blade clattered to the floor beside him, ringing out like the end of an era. Kalen stood over him, breathing hard, silver light fading from his hands. "No more blood," he said quietly. "The laws that made this possible die with you." He turned then toward me, toward the council, toward everyone who still knelt in the shadows. His voice was steady, but something ancient lived in it now. "For generations," he said, "we've mistaken fear for order, power for peace. We believed that strength was measured in the ability to command, but strength is also the ability to forgive." Call. No one moved. Even the wind seemed to still. He stepped toward me slowly, each motion deliberate, his bare feet leaving prints of silver light across the marble. When he stopped before me, his expression softened, not the gaze of a ruler, but of a man who had finally come home. He took the circlet from his head, the crown forged of moonsteel and ash, and held it between us. "I renounce the old order," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "I will not name a Luna to stand beneath me. I will name an equal to stand beside me." My breath caught. "Kalen?" He silenced me with a small shake of his head. Then, before the entire kingdom, he knelt the Alpha King of Valmora, bowing not in defeat, but in devotion. "The Omega you cast out," he said, voice breaking, "is the balance the moon sent me, the compassion I lacked, the voice I silenced. Without her, I am nothing." I couldn't breathe. Every memory of rejection, of pain, of running through the forest with the scent of blood and shame in my lungs shattered under the weight of this moment. He rose then, placing the crown not upon my head, but between our joined hands. Together, we lifted it, and the wolves of the realm, every alpha, every beta, every trembling omega, knelt as one. Not out of fear, not out of obedience, but reverence. The moon above us flared bright, splitting the clouds once more. Silver light poured across the courtyard, illuminating faces wet with tears, hearts unguarded. The sound that followed wasn't a roar or a cry, it was something older, purer, the first unified howl of a kingdom reborn. Kalen turned toward me, his face aglow with the light of both man and wolf. He brushed a blood-stained strand of hair from my cheek, his voice rough but tender. "You were never my weakness," he whispered. "You were the breath I once lost." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of those words settle into me, a promise, written not in law, but in the rhythm of our shared heart. And as the wolves howled beneath the silver sky, I finally understood. This wasn't the rise of a king. It was the rise of the true Alpha, the one who ruled not through fear or fury, but through love that refused to kneel. Weeks had passed since the trial of blood. The kingdom that had once trembled beneath tyranny now breathed again. Valmora was quieter these days, not the silence of fear, but of peace rediscovered. The clang of weapons had been replaced by the murmur of river wind, the sound of rebuilding, of laughter echoing through villages that had forgotten how to smile. Even the wolves, once chained to hierarchy, now roamed freely across the plains. The old banners were gone. Kalen had ordered them burned, the sigils of conquest and dominance that had long divided Alpha from Omega, power from compassion. In their place, Silver tapestries hung from the palace walls, woven with the mark of the moon, not as a symbol of rule, but of unity. For the first time in centuries, the wolves of Valmora had learned to listen. It was strange walking through the same halls where I had once been paraded in chains. The marble was still cracked in places from the battle, but sunlight streamed through the broken roof like blessing instead of judgment. Flowers now grew where blood had fallen, wildflowers that sprouted between the fractures, as if even the earth refused to forget what was healed here. Kaelin stood beside me, speaking quietly to the council gathered in the restored great hall. They no longer bowed when he entered. They didn't need to. They listened. And that, I had learned, was a far deeper form of reverence. When his eyes met mine across the room, the same warmth from that night flickered between us, steady, unshaken. I no longer flinched at the title king. He no longer used it as armor. We were equals now, and the kingdom mirrored that balance. The forest where I had once hidden, where I had held my breath under the hollow tree, praying he wouldn't find me, had been declared sacred ground. Not for worship, but remembrance. Kaelin had decreed it would remain untouched, a sanctuary where no wolf, alpha or omega, could hunt. Classed. It's where the old world ended, he'd said quietly when we first returned there, and the new one began. That morning, I walked there again. The air was cool, the dawn pale and soft. The blood moon was gone, replaced by the gentle curve of a new one, the beginning of another cycle. I trailed my fingers across the bark of the hollow tree, still scarred from where I'd hidden. Moss had grown over it now, green and patient, reclaiming what had once been a symbol of fear. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the forest's hum return, that ancient, low pulse that seemed to run through every root and stone. Behind me, I heard the familiar sound of his steps. No armor, no crown, just Kaelin, the man, not the king. He joined me at the edge of the clearing, his hand brushing mine, fingers intertwining easily, as if they had always belonged there. The council says the wolves from the southern provinces have pledged allegiance, he said softly. Without bloodshed this time. I smiled faintly. Allegiance sounds too heavy for peace. He chuckled under his breath. You'd rather call it understanding. Yes. I looked up at him. That's what we've been fighting for, isn't it? Not dominance, not survival, just understanding. He nodded, his thumb tracing slow circles across my knuckles. It's easier said than lived. Everything worth living is. For a moment, we said nothing. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the faint sound of the river. Sunlight caught on his hair, and I thought of the first night I saw him again, bleeding, broken, and too proud to ask for help. Now, his strength felt different, quiet, rooted. I used to think power was something you had to prove, he said, voice low. Every day, every battle. But you taught me something else. What's that? That real strength is what you protect, not what you control. I smiled, though my throat tightened. You learned that the hard way. He laughed softly. I had a good teacher. We walked together toward the heart of the forest, where the canopy opened to a small clearing bathed in silver light. The moon hung low, a thin crescent, just being born, soft and unassuming. There was no throne here, no altar, just the ground and the sound of wolves in the distance. For the first time in my life, it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a song. I looked at Kaelin, my chest full with something wordless. The man who had once hunted me now walked beside me as if I were his compass, the only constant left in a world rebuilt from ruin. We stopped by the riverbank. The water shimmered, reflecting both our faces and the moon's faint glow above us. For a moment, it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. Quote, "Do you ever think about the night of the hunt?" I asked quietly. He nodded. Every time I close my eyes, %. Do you regret it? His answer came without hesitation. I regret not seeing you sooner. The wind stirred again, soft, warm, like breath against my ear. The forest seemed to exhale with us, I looked up at the pale sliver of the moon, then at him. Do you hear it? I whispered. He frowned slightly, tilting his head. Hear what? The forest, I said. The way it breathes. It's different now. Softer. He smiled, a quiet curve of his lips that carried years of pain and peace both. He took my hand, pressing my palm against his chest, where his heartbeat thudded steady and sure. Only when you breathe, he murmured. The words lingered in the air like a vow, renewed not of conquest, not even of love, but of belonging. And, as the dawn broke across the forest, gold spilling over silver, I realized that sometimes the greatest kingdoms are not the ones built by hands, but the ones born when two hearts finally learn to listen.